now. So hopefully you just heard that, and you can see the red recording cloud up in the top left corner. Just want to let you know that we have a chat box for comments, but there's also a Q&A box as well. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, if you have comments for the panelists, you can put them in the chat. But if you have a specific question that you would like one or more of the panelists to respond to, please put those questions in the chat. I will be monitoring that. Hopefully I won't have to interrupt the panelists, but whoever's not speaking from the panel will also be monitoring the Q&A box as well, but we want to make sure that we try to respond to as many questions as possible. So with those business items out of the way, just want to welcome you. As you can see on your screen, our webinar is on intentional leveraging of psychologist competencies, you gotta love that colon, a case for expanding administrative leadership training opportunities. And as you can see, we have 4 amazing psychologist panelists today. I'm going to do all the introductions up front, and then I'm going to turn it over to them. First, I'll start with my buddy from VISN 5, Dr. Cheryl Lowman is currently the Chief Mental Health Officer in the VA Capital Healthcare Network for VA. She earned her Ph.D. in counseling psychology from, I didn't know this, Cheryl, SUNY Albany, and served as an intern and supervisor psychologist in the VA since 1990. Dr. Brent Kenney is the Deputy Mental Health Chief at the Kansas City VA and also the acting CMHO for VISN 16. I'm sorry, 15. I'm getting my numbers mixed up. VISN 15. VA Heartland Network. He earned his PhD in clinical psychology from UT Austin, had a VA internship and fellowship training, has served as a mentor and mentee in the VA training and peer leadership programs. Dr. Charlotte McCloskey is right next door, is the local recovery coordinator at the Kansas City VA and former postdoctoral training director in the Kansas City VA psychology training program. She received her PhD in counseling psychology at the University of Missouri in Columbia. And last but certainly not least, you've seen and heard him before, Dr. Jeff Bates is the acting director of Associated Health Education in the Office of Academic Affiliations in VA. He has served as a psychologist both in VA and the Bureau of Prisons, so he's very accustomed to public service settings. He received his PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Georgia. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iwasa, for this, and also this opportunity to do this presentation today. One of the things that we wanted to kind of give you is a quick overview of what we're going to do, and also kind of the reasons why we kind of came together to do this. And so it's really about kind of broadening the discussion of instituting training leadership, actually in the actual either internship or postdoctoral level. And we're going to actually broaden that conversation into not only that, but also into the competencies. We're going to talk about a couple of examples of doing this, things that have actually been attempted. One will be on the VISN level, and then one will be at a facility location. And then also one of the reasons why we're doing this and why we felt like this might be helpful is that there's very little opportunity out there for our trainees to have this kind of exposure. You know, we've heard from trainees that when they're looking for these opportunities, that very few places are coming up. So we're certainly hoping that this will be something that will inspire those of you who are here, maybe involved in training, or at least just on your staff so you can have conversations about this. Or maybe you're a trainee that decided to kind of log in because you'd like to know more about this. And so hopefully talk to your staff there or think about doing this as a future leader. And then also too, we know that as we're looking towards the future at the VA, it's incredibly vital that we focus on leadership development for psychologists. As we're talking about developing psychologists, we also want to move forward with the idea of servant leaders as we move towards and be an even stronger, high reliability organization. And now I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Kenney.
Great. Thank you, Dr. McCloskey. So as we broach this topic and start thinking and talking about psychologists as leaders, we wanted to make an initial point about leadership training itself being essential. So a doctoral degree does not necessarily make you prepared on day one to come in and take leadership projects under your belt, but it certainly gives us a broad base of knowledge to get us started. So although psychologists have many unique analytical, statistical, conceptual skills from our training and a lot of knowledge of behaviors, either at the individual level or even at the systems level that we could use in administrative roles, thoughtful application of training, I think will take us to that next level. So we're going to talk today about psychology competencies. And I did want to use an example here. So I think everybody on the call is going to recall from maybe some classes years back where they're thinking about it lately. Just intelligence types is one example. So we've got Spearman's G factor and overall intelligence, and we've got Gardner's multiple intelligences that may combine, reinforce each other, kind of cluster together in different areas. And so the competencies that have to do with leadership, maybe some of them we can think of as, unique standalone skills and competencies, and others are going to combine together. But as we apply that idea to leadership domains, we might think about things like organizational alignment, making changes happen at an organizational level, or organizational professional skills, understanding the organization and how to make changes happen. We might think about topics like diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and how individual leaders can affect organizational cultures in positive ways. Ethical decisions we might need to make as leaders versus what may be legally allowable, or what our policies say we have to do or should do or may do, or even research competencies. So there's a lot of different knowledge that may have come up in our training that we can apply, but I think we should be thoughtful about how we're defining what those competencies are. And to steal a metaphor from some earlier discussion with Dr. Bates, are we, as we do this training, thinking about developing our trainee competencies, like teaching them to play an individual scale or to write music itself? So, how are we defining what our goals are here? Trainees do want to know more about leadership. So our goal to foster trainees to perform at actions above their current level of their confidence or their expertise is clearly where we're going with this. But early career psychologists, whether they're trainees or in their first positions as staff members, they can get involved. They do want to get involved. And developing these competencies can be helpful to help them get noticed, take on some creative projects, or to be promoted to a leadership position, to have an idea if they do want to seek those opportunities in the future. So we're really talking about psychologists as leaders and emerging leaders that are developing their identities. So next slide. I'll hand that off to Dr. Lowman.
Dr. Lowman, you're muted.
Okay, can everybody hear me? All right, thank you. So one of the reasons why I began working on a rotation, developing a rotation in leadership, is because in 2015, my career led me to our VISN office, VISN 5. It's a regional role for those of you who aren't in VA, and where I am the Chief Mental Health Officer, and that whole role really is about leadership. So I have observed through the years that many VA psychologists are not aware of existing opportunities within their own VAMC or their VISN to access leadership training. And furthermore, most VA leadership training opportunities really are targeted to those who are current leaders. And I'm going to mention one on this slide, a little bit further down. I will point out that it took me 3 tries with applying to finally get accepted into the Behavioral Health Leadership Training Program, just because of the demand. It's a very big demand with limited slots. So anyway, as I was in the VISN office, recognizing gaps in leadership development, then I also missed training interns. You heard in the introduction, I've been training interns for a very long time. So I thought to develop a psychology minor rotation focused on mental health leadership. And I got that started in 2016. So I didn't develop this in a vacuum. We have great training directors in VISN 5. And so I collaborated with them to hear their thoughts on what would be important, what they thought would be great experiences for interns at the VISN level. And then because I had attended the Behavioral Health Leadership Training Program, I was able to reach back out to those key faculty members to talk about what experiences and peers of knowledge would be important for a newly developing aspiring leader. And then last but not least, in VA, we're lucky to have the National Center of Organizational Development. This is a whole organization filled with psychologists, and their whole focus is on organizational health, and they're all involved in IO or organizational development activities. So I also worked with them because at the time they had a postdoctoral fellowship in leadership development. So, I got lots of great feedback, put this thing together and launched it in 2016. And then of course I had lots of intern feedback throughout the years. So the interns really felt like they were learning a lot. The training directors loved it. It was very exciting. And again, because I'm at a VISN, I was able to take an intern from each of the 3 closest locations to me. So started talking this up, and then excited talking it up at different conferences brought me to the VA Central Office Psychology Training Council, where they got excited about it too. And then we established a work group. And in the work group, our goal was to really develop a model curriculum and a toolkit. And the reason why we felt this would be important is because, many people at different sites have said, well, this sounds great, but how can we do it? And the other question people had was, well, I don't know if this would really satisfy all of the intern competencies, the profession-wide competencies, so we might not be able to do it. So, we developed these 2 things, the curriculum and the toolkit, for those very reasons, to address those questions. And we had a goal of disseminating this to all facilities in VA who were interested. And we actually had a presentation scheduled at the Association of VA Psychology Leaders in 2020. And I bet you all can guess what happened. We had the pandemic instead, and the whole project got put on hold. So I continued to disseminate this just by word of mouth, talking about it over VA emails. And that is how the rotation got to Dr. McCloskey and Dr. Kenney at Kansas City, and how we began this amazing collaboration. So we will provide you with an overview of these tools in the following discussion, and I am next turning this over to Dr. McCloskey.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Lowman. Yes, that's exactly right. So, as a local recovery coordinator who works with our veteran peer support specialists, I think lived experience is really important. And so, when I was a training director, I often thought about my own lived experience of not only being a trainee, but then also too being a psychologist within the VA, and how to navigate these waters, and what does it mean to have leadership and how to come to leadership. When I started back in 2008 in my postdoctoral residency, we didn't have a lot of examples of psychologists in leadership positions. And so again, I think this has been something that's been kind of cooking in me for a long time. And also I just thought, wow, what a great opportunity, especially if somebody just right out the door, when they come in as an intern or a postdoctoral resident, how could we provide them with some opportunities to get this exposure? And as Dr. Lowman also kind of shared, sometimes our leadership opportunity for trainings can be very tough to get into. We might apply again and again. So what a wonderful opportunity it is to maybe think about this in our training programs. So while I was still a training director, I sent out kind of a call to find out what other folks were doing for administrative minors. And then my job transitioned where I took on the role of being local recovery coordinator. So then just had the opportunity to focus on just developing an administrative minor. And one of the things that I received from that time when I was on listserv was Dr. Lowman's materials. And so that was the beginning of our collaboration. And then I had the great, wonderful, and this is also too where I'm going to encourage other folks that might be thinking about implementing this at your VAs, had the great collaborative efforts of our psychology executive, which was Dr. Brent Kenney, who's also on this too. So he and I together collaboratively worked to look at what was already out there. So again, completely borrowed because we asked, borrowed Dr. Lowman's foundation, and then built on that for the needs of our local needs here in Kansas City. So we ended up doing a 6-month rotation. We started first with our pre-doctoral psychology. We started actually first with our postdocs, and then we expanded that and actually ended up also then including interns. So we got an opportunity to kind of see how we needed to kind of flex, what we were doing and how we were doing that. And we'll talk a lot about this, and I think that this is important, but I will not take too much steam away because I'm excited for you all to kind of see what's coming up. But again, making sure that we are, as leaders, and again, this is across those competencies, this should not be separate, but again, really made sure to infuse a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion as leaders through our rotations. So just literally in every aspect of what we were doing. And then another thing that we did that was kind of an addition was we also, we're psychologists. We love measurement. At least we should. This is actually one of our backbones. And so we really worked to do some assessments of person factors as servant leaders for our trainees, which then we helped build them up and to kind of thinking and already kind of conceptualizing the skills that they had. So again, we as servant leaders tried to build some servant leaders. And then also too, with one of the other things that I want to kind of highlight, we'll talk more about this, especially when they're talking about the toolkit. And again, this is what we borrowed, reading the Uniform Mental Health Services Handbook. I think most people across the VA working in mental health probably have never looked at the handbook. And I know those leaders sitting on this call right now are probably squirming to hear that, but we know that's true. So how wonderful it was to have this opportunity and go through it. But then that led into a conversation of restoring trust in VA healthcare, because that's really, truly, at the end of the day, we are here for veterans. And then with our administrative project, again, kind of giving an opportunity for our trainees to shine, but then also giving them an opportunity to give something to the community here at the Kansas City VA. And we also helped them see that they could have an impact even as a trainee. And again, that's what we want to do. We want to kind of culminate, or kind of want to nurture that hope and that ability to be a change maker. So, and I'll pass this now over to Dr. Kenney to finish talking about what we did here in Kansas City.
Thank you very much. So one thing that we noted right away as we started to have this opportunity to be supervisors of this training experience was looking at these leadership competencies in practice and what our trainees were coming in with already. So they were coming in already with corporate experience where they supervised others, sometimes in formal ways, sometimes in informal ways, but they had identities from corporate work. They had prior training experiences where they were thinking about, administrative and leadership type tasks that they took on and how they went. In some cases, they wanted to know how I could have handled this better. In other cases, they did an amazing job, and we were able to learn from them. We also shared in a very open way our personal journeys and our careers as supervisors. We covered our successes that led us to our current roles, the things that we like about our current roles, and we also shared some of our personal setbacks and failures. We talked about things that we wish we knew when we were at their developmental level, and the next step and the next step, and really let them ask any questions they had, so we could really demystify what leadership and all these different levels of, for everybody in the VA, this very complex onion with multiple levels, is, really help them understand what they were getting into if they wanted to take on certain career paths. That third point under the first bullet is just to point out that we did pull out organizational charts. We talked about the decision-making authorities in the VA hospital system, but we also talked about some of the unwritten relational power structures. So I really want to underscore this point that I think transparency is a very key value, especially for trainees. Maybe some of that's generational, or maybe some of that's the developmental level where they're going to want to really dive in and learn. They've been in school for a while, of course. They're used to learning. They're used to thinking about things really broadly, and they do want to know about your personal experiences. So we did share that. And then under that 1,000 examples, and I give a few specifics. The idea here is that, the preparation for our time with the trainees at the Kansas City VA and those rotations, it took some preparation early on, but then week to week, when we're spending the time with the trainees, it wasn't that time consuming. We had things in the back of our minds that were changes that were happening at the Kansas City VA, things we wanted to happen that we weren't seeing yet. And so we were able to talk about things like on the moment, integrating safety stories more into weekly meetings and things like that. So I think at any level of leadership, any amount of years you've been in your current position, you're going to be able to have some things that you can pull from to talk about with the trainees. And the last bullet point, just setting expectations. I think these experiences that we're talking about today also apply to other emerging VA leaders. Maybe you've got a first staff member just joining the VA, or maybe it's their third VA, it's their first week with you at your facility, but in your orientation with them, and then in recurring, maybe annual or biannual performance appraisal meetings, I think we should be talking about leadership. We should be talking about where we want our organizations to go, and building in some of those IO and business acumen competencies and some of those discussions. So thinking about how has the mission changed lately, leading people during these transitions. We've certainly been experiencing a lot of those in our country and in our hospital systems over the last couple of years. Also thinking about when may be the right time to seek administrative roles, making the assumption that people are going to have some thoughts and questions for you if you open the door to that discussion. And so, what do those roles look like again, and how to get selected if people are saying, yes, I do want to raise my hand, but I wouldn't know where to start. And I think that's it for this slide. I'm going to hand back over to Dr. Bates to talk some about the accreditation angle as we design these programs.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, or if you're in Hawaii or Alaska, good morning. I just want to say before I get started, I got to look at the participant list, and it's just an honor that so many folks who are leaders have joined this call. That's a really humbling thing. And so thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. It may not surprise anybody on the panelist side. I'm going to start off a little off task a little bit and talk about some things that really struck me as we were going through the rehearsal on this. And one is the importance of transformational and transactional leadership. Psychology training can become very transactional in nature. It can become solely focused on the standards of accreditation or making sure we're doing the things, rather than thinking about how we can transform experiences for the trainees who come to train with us, and really looking past just the things to how we can start to blend the things together. And it's been really neat to be on this panel and see the transformational aspect of the leaders who are here. The other thing that I think you've heard already is I think being a leader and setting up a leadership rotation is as much about the heart as it is about the head. You're going to hear a lot about relationships. You're going to hear a lot about approach, but this really is kind of a heart check as much as it is something related to competencies. And so I think that's really important. The final off-task topic that I'll say is the beauty of thinking about leadership as a competency is that it opens it up to everybody. Leadership is not something that is, you're not born a leader. You develop leadership competencies over time. And by reducing it, what psychologists do really well, right? We operationalize things. We use our Skinnerian tactics to break things down to behaviors, and we put those together in something organized by an ethos. But I really think the importance of talking about competencies of leadership with trainees is it takes this thing that feels really awkward and really different, and I'm not a leader and I'm just working through the next part of my career, and it opens up a really important door for folks to start developing competencies and beginning to dream about how they may be able to use the competencies they're developing to better the good of all of us. And that's really, I think, in part what Division 18 is about, giving away the profession. That's what I love about being a public service psychologist. So with that aside, let me go through the bullet points really quickly. And what we are talking about today is taking this large concept of leadership and breaking it down into operational aspects that are connected to competencies. And so we're going to see in just a second, Dr. Lowman and I are going to have a back and forth where Dr. Lowman presents from her toolkit, and we connect her toolkit to some of the profession-wide competencies. And so learning the language of the competencies of APA. So if you have an APA site visitor that comes in and they ask questions about a leadership competency, you're able to answer those from the profession-wide competencies. Thinking through and understanding and really developing a mastery of the standards of accreditation and the implementing regulations, so you can start to play with those a little bit. The more you understand the basics of the standards of accreditation and the implementing regulation, the more freedom you have to connect the dots between different things. We'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. The other thing is, if you're going to look at a leadership rotation, it has to be a planned protein and not a carb. This is something that has to be, to pull it off well, I think, it has to be something that's planned with the infrastructure that's present. You have to have relationships and connections throughout the facility in order to bring an interprofessional component to it. And so placing it as a primary building block, we're going to have a rhetorical question later in the presentation, but as a primary building block of what it means to be a psychologist, and then develop competencies and experiences to help develop that skill set is a really important consideration. This image to the right, if you don't recognize it, is the Rosetta Stone, which was key to unlocking a couple of different languages. It's a stone that's in 3 different languages, and we were able to learn some of the dead languages that were out there from this. And I like this analogy because it serves as a crosswalk between these wonderful opportunities that folks have created for leadership and tying those directly to what's required of a psychologist. I think that's a really interesting and helpful predicate on which to base these experiences. And finally, leadership at its core, I think, is really about connecting what we do with who we are as a profession. And I go even further, and maybe in a bit of a challenging way, to say it also connects with who we are as a person. And I want to talk a little bit more about that when we get to diversity, multiculturalism competencies. But these rotations really start to intentionally connect experiences at the VISN level, at the facility level, with our identity as a profession. And I think if we're going to continue to take a role as leaders in healthcare, as leaders in various aspects, we have to continue to connect that with who we are as a profession. Next slide, please. So one of the top bullet point here is thinking through, if you want to do a leadership rotation at your facility, thinking through the infrastructure. Do you have the infrastructure in place to pull that off? And it's a chicken and an egg conversation. Do you develop the rotation and then find the things to make the rotation work? Or do you see what the infrastructure is for a leadership opportunity and then build based on those opportunities? For those who've been around for a while, under the guidelines and principles of accreditation, supervision was something that was not as specifically targeted as it is right now under the standards of accreditation. And many of us several years ago had to have this thought process of how do we bring in actual or simulated clinical supervision into our training programs, because that's what became required under the standards of accreditation. Very similar process when you're thinking about a leadership rotation, is bringing that part in intentionally. And next, as you think through it, do the profession-wide competencies, do they have a comparator for leadership or administration? And I'm going to kind of tell a little bit from down the road. It's probably a combination of multiple competencies, but how do we intentionally blend those together? More broadly, when we think about psychology training and nuanced rotations like leadership rotations, do all of the training experiences need to connect to profession-wide competencies, or just some of them? And that's a consideration when you're designing your training program, when you're making these rotations, thinking about these elective type rotations that are really important. How do we connect those to the profession-wide competencies? And if they offer experiences that aren't exactly captured by those, is that okay? And finally, as we go through this next piece, Dr. Lowman and I are going to go back and forth with her toolkit and with the profession-wide competencies. And the first one we're going to do is related to assessment. So Dr. Lowman, I want to kick it back to you to talk about assessment.
All right. So the goal of the toolkit, again, was to identify a menu of different activities and experiences that interns can take part in and learn leadership. And again, these are all about what you have available to you. We just had a question about that in the chat about somebody saying, well, there aren't too many leadership opportunities outside of mental health at my facility. But in your mental health service, we have leaders. We have leaders in our mental health service. It has to be run by leaders. So, you know, there's some opportunities at every site. So here under assessment, I'm not going to read every one of these, but I do have some favorites that I want to share that I use with every intern that walks through and works with me at the VISN. And I forgot to mention, they would come and shadow with me for an entire day. This is pre-COVID. They would be there with me through the entire day. So anyway, the three favorites that I have here, I know Dr. McCloskey mentioned this earlier, the Uniform Mental Health Services Handbook. You know, why is that important? Well, if we're in leadership, we need to understand why we do what we do. Why are we offering PTSD treatment in the ways that we do it? Why do we have certain numbers of PCMHI providers at large CBOCs versus smaller ones? You know, so they really need to understand the whole big picture of mental health policy. And then my absolute favorite activity that I think is critical, because I know not even many frontline psychologists might be as familiar with this, is our performance metrics. So reviewing mental health performance metrics with interns, especially SAIL, strategic analytics for improvement in learning, if you're not within VA. This is critical because as leaders, we are called upon to evaluate the quality of what we are offering and providing for patients. And, you know, we don't have the time to review every single patient chart. So we have developed all these quality metrics to examine the health of our interventions and our hospitals for us. So, you know, with SAIL, the interesting thing is it's not just about mental health. It looks at many parameters within the hospital. And so because each one of my interns comes from a different facility, we would start there. If one intern was coming, say, from the Baltimore facility, we look at how overall the SAIL metrics work for Baltimore, looking at all the services, and then we narrow down to mental health. And I will tell you, if you're not in VA, we have 33 SAIL metrics, just looking at mental health. And then furthermore, every intern comes to me with certain areas that they're very focused on and interested in. And so whether it's PTSD or serious mental illness, then we look at their facility, we look at those metrics, and then we talk about how each one of these metrics is not just a number, but it applies to a patient and patient care. And then, based on their knowledge so far of their service and the areas that they're interested in, we talk about maybe what could be improved, what could be changed. So that's how we use it. And in addition to SAIL, there are numerous other metrics. I won't even go into many for suicide prevention and other areas. So I think that's key. And some of my interns will go back to their facility after the shadow day, and all their other interns will gather around. They'll want to know what they learned. And even staff, and I've heard stories where they'll say, well, other frontline staff didn't know this and they wish they had this opportunity, right? So it's so important. And then the last thing on here that I'll just briefly talk about is reviewing patient complaint data. That's reviewing data provided in issue briefs, White House hotline, congressional complaints, right? So when you're in leadership, whether you're at the facility or in a VISN, you're going to get the patient complaints. And I think this is such a great learning opportunity for interns, because after they've read the Mental Health Services Handbook and learned all about SAIL, then we can take a look at what the complaint is. And I can have them, research it and take a look at the policies and then come back to me and say, was this good care provided? Was something missing per the policy? What do you think we ought to do with this complaint? Because we have service recovery, right? We're trying to make things right for the veteran. So, I think that's another great activity for them and that everybody can do, whether you're in a VISN or a facility. And so now this is the toolkit part. I'm turning this back over to Dr. Bates, who's going to discuss how this works for the profession-wide competencies.
And what a great message in that last example about combining the metrics of assessment with ensuring we're providing the best care to our veterans. Sometimes when there's a complaint, we can think about one side or the other, but here's where we bring our best as a psychologist to a leadership example. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this slide, but what I'd like you to see in this slide is an intentional use of implementing regulation C8I, C8-1 in this example of how we use the language of the implementing regulations to ensure that we're describing the rotation in a way that's behavioral, that uses the language of the profession-wide competencies and connects with the broad concept of assessment. We could spend some time talking about the psychometric aspect of assessment, but we're making sure that there's a dovetail between the experience and the accreditation standard itself. And so you'll have access to this slide and you'll be able to look through the example further. Dr. Lowman, let me turn it back to you to talk about diversity and multicultural from the toolkit.
All right, so we thought it would be really important to give everybody here some examples of what you could do for diversity and inclusion. And, I will just say that at the VISN level, in my office, we do not have a diversity committee, but you can see that that is down there, the very last bullet. I've had interns participate in those at their facilities. It's very meaningful work and something you can do that will be a great leadership option for them. But so again, speaking to, we work with what we have. One of the things that I work with the interns with is the very top bullet, conducting professional interviews with allied health professionals. And why do I do this? Well, if you think about leadership anywhere in our organization, we don't just exist in a vacuum. We are working with other people from other service lines. We at the facility, you can't just have all the money for the year's budget go to mental health. We have to share and we have to compromise and negotiate. We have to understand that other services have needs too, and they have programs, etc. So it's really important for a psychologist to get out of our siloed training and learn how other leaders are trained and what they do. So I do that with all of our interns at the VISN office. And I also arrange for them to have interviews with leaders at their facility. And then again, now this would be an example of something that I have access to. I know not everybody does. We're very close to central office. So the other thing that I've been able to do, which interns have really loved, is to arrange a shadow day with OMHSP, specifically with our chief psychologist, Dr. Pollock, and they come back just, with lots of amazing things to say about what they learned about policy and what central office does. So that's one, but everybody can have their interns interview other professionals at your facility. And then the other activity that I also utilize a lot, and just want to speak to really quickly, is learning how, this is the third bullet down, service delivery and outreach efforts intersect with diversity factors. So in my role and at the VISN office, we have very different cultural and geographic regions. We have two highly urban areas, DC and Baltimore, but then we have rural West Virginia. And so just one quick example, because I know I want to keep us on time here. If you think about suicide prevention and all the work we're doing with lethal means safety, well, in Maryland, the state passed an extreme risk protective order, and ERPO. And anybody in the state who's worried about a citizen who might have a risk of gun violence can go to a magistrate and present their concerns, and if the magistrate agrees that this is concerning, the police are able to go to that person's home and remove their weapons. This would never occur in West Virginia. West Virginia is a heavy proponent of Second Amendment rights, and it has one of the highest rates of suicide deaths by gun in the nation. So, our lethal means safety efforts are going to have to be quite different when we think about the culture of West Virginia versus the culture of Maryland. So I'm going to leave that there and turn that back over to Dr. Bates for the profession-wide competencies for DEI.
Thank you. And I'll be really brief on this slide. And let me just say at the beginning, I think if we're not infusing diversity and multiculturalism into all of the profession-wide competencies, I honestly think we're doing it wrong. I think that these competencies, these profession-wide competencies, should be a part of every other thing that psychology trainees do, and also how they're measured in terms of their competencies. And there's no difference when it comes to leadership as well, and intentionally incorporating aspects of diversity and multiculturalism into our leadership rotation and into how we look at the competencies that are developed. So I'll offer you these proposed competencies for the leadership rotation related to cultural diversity. And Dr. McCloskey, I'll pass it on to you. You're muted, Dr. McCloskey.
Thank you. Just also too, I know sometimes when I'm doing these, as an attendee, these slides should be available to you, so that way you can go back and take a really good look at those. And I believe we're also making the toolkit available to you as well. So, but of course, what's the whole point of doing all of this? The whole point of doing all this is for the trainees. So we wanted to take just a couple of quick slides here to kind of show you some of the comments that were made by the trainees after completing. This first one is all about Dr. Lowman. So because these are some of the words from her, but as she talked about, that there was a whole committee and a whole group of folks that, supported her and her work. And then of course, what she's then going on to pass on to trainees. So I'll just briefly touch on a few things in this, but again, you can read this later. But it just says, the first one says, from this, I have also gained an appreciation for the high standards the VA is held to and the thoughtful work done on every level of leadership. I really love this one that's kind of in the beige. because this is really important, because we as psychologists, we need to use our brains in the way that we have got them trained in. But it's changed my trajectory within the VA from being an obedient follower of policy to an informed, involved VA psychologist. I mean, that's the good stuff right there. That's the whole point of doing all of this. And then also on the other one, it says, I will forever hold a new lens to view how the VA works at higher levels of leadership, and how policies and decisions are made utilizing multiple performance dashboards and knowledge systems. So, I mean, so again, we're seeing trainees who are going forward and feeling empowered. And so on this next slide, and I'm actually going to flip my screen, and hopefully it's going to work okay. We've got a video of, and we're going to try to play both videos, but this is the first video. This is Dr. Kilbearer from the Kansas City VA, and hopefully you could hear him.
I was a psychology resident here as well.
You all hear this
And
now?
as part of my residency, I was able to spend 6 months on the administrative minor rotation working with Dr. McCloskey and Dr. Kenney. This rotation was a really unique and impactful training experience. There weren't a lot of training programs that I looked at when I was considering my options for residency that had this rotation. In fact, I think Kansas City was the only one. And in full honesty, it was one of the factors that really attracted me to the training program as a whole. And when I signed up for it, you know, I had the expectation that it would help me to kind of solidify my career plans, to really help me to figure out what I want to do going forward. And when I think about the impact of that rotation, it certainly served that purpose. So working with Dr. McCloskey and Dr. Kenney in this rotation helped me to solidify that I wanted to be a psychologist within the VA. And it really helped me to, they helped me to get a better understanding of what life as a VA psychologist really looks like in terms of day-to-day and year-to-year functioning. They also spent a lot of time talking to us about leadership within the VA and how to get involved with leadership, what the leadership process looks like, and from them sharing their own experiences and their own journeys with getting involved with leadership really helped to demystify the whole process as a whole. You know, coming in as a trainee, you don't really get a lot of information throughout your training about how to excel within a specific hospital setting like a VA. Not only that, but what getting involved with leadership looks like. So when they shared about their own experiences, we got a lot of information about really what this looks like, how to get involved. Not only that, but how to get involved early on in our career as well. So that was another huge benefit of this rotation, is we got insight into a process that we didn't have any information about previously. And it really transferred it from being something that was purely aspirational to being something that seemed more achievable and something that was really within our own grasps and ability to really to take on ourselves. It also helped to shape my professional goals in a similar way. So, you know, it helped me to kind of really specifically focus on the different areas of leadership that I want to get involved with in my career. So for me, I have a passion in training. I want to be involved with training leadership at some point in the future in my career. And I spoke with both Dr. McCloskey and Dr. Kenney about how to do just that. So when I come on a staff, how to start to get involved with the right people, the right committees, in order to kind of put myself in a position where I can be a leader in the training committee at some point in time. So again, this is a really impactful, beneficial, and just a great training experience all around. You know, I've spoken with other trainees at various locations, and they do not have an administrative minor, and I tell them about it, and they all kind of have the same feedback of that's something that they wish they had as well. So definitely a worthwhile training experience, and I was very happy and feel very lucky that I got the opportunity to complete it last year with Dr. McCloskey and Dr. Kenney.
And then I'm going to turn this over now, if Dr. Kenney, if you could share the other slide by Dr. Salke. And I apologize, I think Dr. Salke is actually on. I couldn't get it to open. So if Dr. Kenney, if you could go ahead and open that up on yours, and I will stop sharing.
All right, let me press play and see if you all can hear.
My name is Lily Salke. I'm a new trauma services staff psychologist at the DCVA. I completed my administrative rotation with Dr. Lowman during my internship year at the DCVA a couple of years ago. And I can say with the utmost confidence that this rotation truly changed my life. When I came into the rotation, I had a little bit of an interest in VA leadership. I knew I was interested in program development, but I really had no idea what I was gonna kind of learn and what this rotation. Working with Dr. Lowman, I had the opportunity to meet with leaders across the different disciplines, across VA, really had an opportunity to gain insight into how mental health initiatives are developed and implemented. It just really opened my eyes to a whole new world of what it means to be a psychologist, what it means to serve veterans and to serve individuals kind of on that larger scale. Working with Dr. Lowman, I got to engage in my own program development project in a clinic that was near and dear to my heart that I ended up going on to be a fellow in the following year. And I also got to create kind of an individualized training plan that helped me to really think about what I wanted and where I was headed. And it was really that allowed me to pursue fellowship. And on fellowship, I had such a new perspective, and I advocated and spent a lot of my time engaged in program development and program improvement projects. I worked with leadership as much as I could, and I stayed in touch with Dr. Lowman throughout. She has been the greatest resource I've had kind of in my career and has really become a mentor. And it is really because of her wisdom and guidance that I pursued a job in the trauma services program here at the DCBA and was able to secure that and start within a week of finishing my fellowship. So I can say kind of that I take this program development kind of lens in everything that I do. I believe that as a psychologist, in order to serve veterans, there is a lot to be done kind of on a programmatic and leadership level. I have pursuits and dreams of one day being in VA leadership myself, and it is because of this rotation that I feel confident that I can get there, and I feel excited about that. So I really cannot say in any simpler terms that this rotation not only impacted my career, but it really made it.
All right, what good testimonials. Let's see, are you all seeing the screen again, the slides? All right, so, given our time, I just want to make a quick point. Some of our lessons learned that we talked about as a group as we looked at, training from the OAA lens at the VISN level, at the facility level. Number one, and this question also came up in the chat. So, it's not just your title that makes you prepared to maybe take something like this on. Having some connections as a leader, leveraging your own experience, and just making those connections are really appreciated by the trainees. They get a lot out of it, and it really can change their conceptualization of what needs to be done to open up some of these doors. It also sounds like from both of these testimonials, it's really great to hear that this helped keep some really talented people within the VA, which of course we're all very motivated to do in the face perhaps of intense competition from the private sector. And we also all talked as a group about coming to this with some intentionality of what we want people to get out of the experience, what are some of the values we want people to take away from this, and really being able to identify as future leaders. The approaches can be varied. They can be matched to your site, and specific feedback from your trainees, because you're going to have different trainees with different strengths and weaknesses and questions for you. Another really key point is just to go ahead and get started. So we're hoping to be cheerleaders a bit today, and just encouraging everybody to take those next steps and think about how they can approach their training directors or their local leadership, write some things up and get it into your handbooks, and maybe get started soon. And then just sort of a quick style point at the very end, and I'll move on, is just this idea that, oh my gosh, I lost my notes. Pardon me. Just to model professionalism, we can create that muscle memory for people later in their careers, long after the training rotation is over.
So I'm going to have just a brief challenge, and what I'm going to say is, average results require average effort. Excellent results require excellent effort. And when we talk about training, we are talking about minimum level of achievement. So is leadership something that should be considered a profession-wide competency or something related to administration? Or is it something that remains just as an elective? And then the last rhetorical question I'd leave you with is leadership a competency in and of itself, or is it just an amalgam of the other competencies that are there as well? I'm certainly happy to talk offline for those. I want to pass it on to Dr. Lowman for our last word, because this is where our work started, is with her great work. So Dr. Lowman.
All right, thank you. One of the things that I really took home from the Healthcare Leadership Development Training Program was this discussion about tools that we use in our toolbox, and of course, plumbers have plungers for tools and wrenches, and builders have hammers and nails. So what is it that leaders have as a tool? And the correct answer is ourselves. We are the tool. Our personalities, our characteristics, our wisdom, that is the leadership tool. And VA offers a model of servant leadership. That's our leadership model. So we are going to conclude here with this thought. When we hope that you will institute some of these training rotations, because as you've heard, interns really feel like it's valuable, and we feel like it's valuable too. And while you're doing it, we're talking and introducing them to servant leadership. So people really don't care what you know unless they know that you care. And that's the other really important piece that we are teaching our interns, servant leadership. And you can contact any of us at our VA email addresses right here. And I will be happy to share the toolkit and the professional life competencies document if you email me.
Yeah, and we are sorry that we ran right up to the hour. We apologize. We had hoped that we would have a little time for questions. That's why we put our emails on there. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. So back to
Well,
you.
I have to say, on behalf of APA's Division 18 VA section, this was amazing. I think, as I was sitting and listening to the webinar, the one thing that came to mind is I'm thinking, because I know a lot of our attendees, like, what about not just for trainees, but I think we need to also do a better job of helping our already existing psychologists learn leadership development and provide our psychologists with leadership and professional development opportunities. And so let's think outside the box. I think this is really important for our profession, because this is not just about psychology, but it's about mental health as well. I'm thinking not just of psychology leadership, but really there are opportunities outside of psychology, and thinking about mental health as a whole, at least within VA. Jeff was in DOD. I know a number of Federal Bureau of Prisons. I know a number of psychologists who also work for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and they have opportunities outside of psychology for leadership as well. I apologize, Jeff. So I really want you all to think about that. I think that as long as you are involved with your profession, you have something to offer in terms of professional and leadership development to trainees. So think about it. So really want to thank our 4 amazing panelists, their presentation, this recording, and their slides and their toolkit. Hopefully, if you can send me a copy of that as well, will be posted on the VA section website. Give us a couple of days for the recording to download, and go check it out there. If you want CEUs, you will need to complete our SurveyMonkey survey. It's very short, and it's free for all Division 18 members. So here's your opportunity, if you're not a Division 18 member, to join us so you can get your free CEUs for all of our live webinars. So thanks so much to our 4 panelists and all of you who attended today. I really appreciate your time. Take care, everybody.